He reached for her glass with a smug grin, cracked a joke about Terran women tasting better than Terran whiskey, and blinked in confusion when his wrist hit the floor before he realized she'd moved. The bar fell silent. Just moments ago, it had been a noisy mess of traders, mercs, and drifters shoving shoulders and slamming drinks in the outer ring of Station Kallax 3. Now it was dead quiet. Drazik, the alien trader with 3 mouths and 0 common sense, was on the ground screaming, staring in disbelief at the fountain of green blood spraying from his severed wrist. The object of his taunt, a small, quiet human woman in dark travel gear, sat unmoved. She didn't flinch. Didn't gloat. She simply set the glass back in front of her like nothing happened. Nobody had seen the blade. Nobody had even seen her hand move. And yet, Drazik's hand lay twitching on the sticky bar floor beside an untouched glass of Terran bourbon. In the far corner of the bar, the bartender, a patched-up synth named Patch, shook his metal head and muttered under his breath. Idiot touched her glass. A younger merc, watching from behind an upturned stool, leaned in. Who the hell is she? Patch glanced sideways, lowering his voice like he was afraid the wolves might hear. That's the widow. The merc blinked. Widow? As in, Denja 9. Patch didn't answer. He just started pouring another drink and added, better hope she doesn't stand up. Outside the cracked viewport, the spaceport flickered under neon lights and atmospheric shimmer. Inside, time seemed to hold its breath. Drazik was still screaming, holding the stump with his remaining hands while his crew stood frozen, unsure whether to run or shoot. The human woman slowly looked up, finally acknowledging the room. Her eyes scanned the crowd, not angry, not smug. Just measured. Assessing. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost bored. He grabbed what wasn't his. I just returned the favor. A few seats over, one of Drazik's muscleheads, 6'9", horns, thick neck, maybe 2 brain cells, growled and reached for his blaster. Bad choice. The moment the barrel lifted, a flash of metal tore through the air and embedded itself in his forehead with a quiet thunk. His body slumped to the ground before anyone registered he'd even moved. The small blade clicked softly as it retracted from the man's skull and flew back to the woman's wrist sheath like a loyal dog returning to its master. Then she took another sip. Calm. Unhurried. Someone muttered, "Don't move," but it was already too late for that kind of advice. The rest of Drazik's goons, 4 of them, well-armed and now properly spooked, were glancing at each other, trying to calculate odds. One of them took a step back. Another one tried bluffing, puffing his chest. You know who you just messed with, girl. She raised an eyebrow. If you think this is messing, you're not going to like the next part. The bartender crouched behind the bar without a word. The regulars began sliding quietly out of view, as if they'd rehearsed it. Even the music cut off, someone had smartly unplugged the jukebox. The crew leader opened his mouth to threaten her again, but before the sound came out, she stood. That alone was enough to snap the room's tension like a cable under pressure. She wasn't tall. She wasn't visibly armed. But something in the way she moved made even the brave idiots hesitate. In her hand, barely visible, was a thin black object no longer than a writing stylus. It hummed. Then it buzzed. Then it flicked outward into a meter-long blade. No glow, no theatrics. Just cold, silent death. You have 3 choices, she said. Run, bleed, or stay and drink like civilized organisms. That last part came with the hint of a smile, and the kind of stillness that meant she could move faster than anyone here could think. 2 of the thugs bolted. 1 hesitated and followed. The last one, shaking and unsure, sat down slowly and reached for the nearest drink that wasn't hers. She let him. The message had been delivered. Drazik was gone, dragged out by his surviving crew, screaming and cursing in a language half the room didn't understand. But no one moved to help him. The woman sat back down. Patch straightened behind the bar, poured her a fresh bourbon, and placed it in front of her without a word. On the house, he said quietly. She nodded once. In the shadows near the exit, a cloaked figure adjusted his shoulder cam and whispered into a comm, "Target confirmed. Kira Vale. Facial match 94.2%. Orders. Static. Then a cold voice replied, confirm bounty status. Dead or alive? The figure paused. Original contract was kill on sight. Updated one says, bring her in. Another voice, barely audible, hissed, good luck with that. The figure hesitated. She's different than the last data suggests. Then he turned off the comm slowly. Deliberately. He wasn't paid enough for this. Back in the bar, Kira leaned back against her seat and stared at the glass. The bourbon tasted cheap, but familiar. The kind of taste that reached back years and brought things best left forgotten. She could still feel Danger 9 in her bones. Still hear the screams when her team was left behind. Still remember the order to vanish. Erased. Betrayed. But not broken. Never broken. She caught a reflection in the bar mirror. Not hers, someone watching. She didn't move. Didn't react. Just made a mental note of the angle. One more observer. One more tale. Let them come. She wasn't running anymore. Outside, a shuttle docked silently. Inside, the bounty squad geared up. 7 in total. 3 enhanced. All cocky. They'd been promised an easy target. Human. Isolated. Vulnerable. Inside, Patch poured himself a drink. You're staying long, he asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes were already scanning the room. The traps were set. The exits mapped. The bodies would be moved later. Guess not, Patch mumbled. He watched her hand twitch slightly toward the blade again. And this time, he ducked before anyone even tried to touch her glass. The door blew inward with a burst of white gas and shrapnel, sending debris across the bar floor just as Kira tipped her glass to her lips again. The bourbon trembled in the bottom, but she didn't. Smoke coiled into the room like a predator's tongue. 7 figures stepped through, dark armor gleaming beneath neon signage and carbon dust. They didn't speak. Not at first. Just scanned, their visors sweeping over the scene like hunting drones, reading thermal signatures, biometric pulses, blood splatter. They stopped when they saw her. Still sitting. Still sipping. Still completely unbothered. The one in the center, bulkier than the others and with a glowing red slash across his helmet, finally broke the silence. Kira Vale. Stand down. You're coming with us. His voice modulator was meant to intimidate. It fell flat. Kira didn't even blink. Instead, she tapped the rim of her glass once with her nail and pushed it forward across the bar. Come and get me then, she said, her tone as dry as the planet outside. The squad didn't hesitate. They split formation like wolves, 3 fanning left, 3 right, and the center charging forward. But they didn't know the floorboards had already been sabotaged. The moment the boots of the lead pair hit the 3rd tile in, they triggered a compressed grave disruption mine, one of her own designs. The floor buckled upward with a dull whomp, and both soldiers were flung against the ceiling, smashed through broken rafters, and collapsed into the dark with sparks flickering off their armor. She was already moving. The moment the explosion hit, she slid backward off her stool, landed in a crouch, and triggered the hilt at her waist. The black metal rod hissed to life, expanding into the humming blade just as the second trio raised their rifles. Her foot kicked a metal tray from the floor directly into the path of one shot, ricocheting it into the ceiling, while her body blurred forward. The blade passed through the neck of one soldier cleanly. No sound. No mess. Just a soft exhale of breath as he slumped down and folded. The remaining 2 weren't rookies. They moved fast, falling back and switching to pulse rounds. But even fast wasn't fast enough. Kira slid beneath the blast from the first and hurled a plasma disc from her belt toward the second. The disc stuck to his leg. He noticed too late. It exploded in a directed upward arc, shredding the armor and sending him into a seizure of sparks. The last of the trio tried to retreat toward the doorway, where the leader was now raising his rifle with both hands, aiming steady. Then she was gone. One moment she was mid-charge, the next, the faint shimmer of a cloaking veil rippled around her figure. The leader cursed, scanned wildly, switching to heat vision. But by the time he adjusted, she had already slipped behind him. The butt of her blade smashed into his spinal node, disabling his balance module. He stumbled forward, falling to one knee, and she pressed the blade tip gently between the plates of his back armor. "Last chance to walk away with all your organs," she whispered. He snarled and triggered his wrist rocket, forcing her to dodge. The blast missed, but she had to retreat as the final squad member rejoined the fray, having recovered enough to resume fire. The two of them regrouped near the door, laying down suppressing fire as Patch ducked beneath the bar, muttering curses in binary and praying his liquor shelf didn't get vaporized. Glass shattered, wood splintered, and the old jukebox finally gave up and burst into flame. Kira dove behind an overturned table, catching her breath. They were better trained than the street thugs. Possibly ex-military. Possibly former Black Ops. But not good enough. Not if they needed 7 and still hadn't scratched her. She pulled out a pulse dart and tossed it sideways. It hit a nearby wall and projected a brief decoy signal, showing her heat signature moving left. Both soldiers turned instinctively. Rookie mistake. She came in from the right, blade spinning, low and fast. The second-to-last attacker didn't have time to scream. The leader turned in time to parry with a retractable wrist blade, steel meeting plasma. Sparks flew. The force of the impact knocked them both back. He fired again, this time a scatterburst, and it clipped her side. Not deep, but enough to singe. She winced, ducked behind a column, and wiped the blood with her thumb. Then she smiled. "You're better than most," she called out. "Still gonna need a medic." He didn't answer. He was adjusting something on his gauntlet, syncing to a drone unit overhead. A blue beam flickered down through the roof, tracking, targeting. She noticed too late. The drone fired a mini-missile directly at her cover, and it blew apart in a sharp flash of concussive force, hurling her across the bar and into a table leg. She lay still for a moment. The leader stepped forward slowly, hand on his sidearm now. Confident. Too confident. When he got close, he raised the pistol and aimed at her chest. Then the floor beneath him caved in. She'd rigged the second trap hours earlier, tied into the stabilizer beams beneath the bar floor. He fell 6 feet into a reinforced crate lined with old electronets. They snapped shut like a rib cage, locking down on his limbs, buzzing at high voltage. He screamed as his suit tried to compensate and failed. She stood over the edge and looked down at him. "You forgot the first rule," she said, voice cold now. "This isn't about bringing me in. It's about who sent you." He didn't speak. Just glared up, pain twisting his face. The visor cracked across the middle. She knelt beside the crate and tapped the helmet. "What's your name?" He stayed silent. She frowned, then reached down, pried open the helmet latches, and pulled it off. His face was gray. Too gray. His eyes, milky, unfocused. Not quite alive. Not quite dead either. She leaned closer and whispered, "You're not a soldier, are you? You're a puppet." A low whir came from his neck. Synthetic threads pulsed under the skin, and then his body went still. The light in his visor dimmed to black. Self-destruct trigger. Whoever sent him didn't want him captured. She stood slowly, heart beating faster now. This wasn't just another high-bounty grab. This was surgical. Measured. Personal. Kira walked back to the bar, now a war zone of broken furniture and unconscious bodies. Patch peeked out. "You okay?" "Fine," she said. "But it's not over." She picked up the broken glass of bourbon and stared at it. A drip of blood slid down her wrist and mixed with the drink on the counter. She let it fall. Then she turned toward the exit, scanning the crowd that had gathered just beyond the blast doors. No one stepped in. No one dared. She passed them without a word. But as she moved through the shadows, she whispered one thing into her comm. "Ghost protocol is active. Someone woke the wrong dead woman." The wind on the crater shelf tasted like rust and forgotten wars. Dust spiraled in low gravity, whispering across jagged rock and down into the hollow of what used to be a classified archive site. No signs, no beacons, nothing but ancient scars burned into the ground from orbital strikes that failed to fully erase it. Kira stood at the edge, Hood up, eyes locked on the ravaged entrance carved into the rock. What remained of the security was buried in silence and dry bones. She stepped forward without hesitation, boots crunching through the debris of a war nobody bothered to remember anymore. She reached a thick slab of metal buried halfway in ash. It was disguised as wreckage, but when she knelt and wiped a hand across its surface, faint etchings shimmered to life. Not words. Not numbers. Symbols older than most current tech languages. One by one, she pressed her fingers against them in a specific sequence. The metal shifted with a hiss. A faint glow pulsed under the rock as a slot opened wide enough for a palm. She slid her hand inside and grimaced. A second later, the scanner pierced her skin with a microspike. Blood ran down her wrist and into the socket. The glow turned red. Her voice was calm. Authorization code burned into memory. No hesitation. Kira Vale. Echo Sector. Denja 9. Protocol, Widowfall. The glow vanished. A low rumble moved through the crater floor, and then the entrance yawned open in sections, each panel folding inward like a steel iris. Cold air hissed up from below. The lights were dim, flickering, but they still worked. The ghosts of the past were not dead. Just waiting. Kira descended through the hollow shaft, her hand trailing the edge of the ladder out of habit. The walls were lined with shattered data conduits, some still bleeding weak light. At the bottom, the main terminal blinked awake at her presence. A single screen lit the darkness. No greeting. No interface. Just a blank slate waiting for input. She placed her palm on the reader and braced. The data stream began slowly, then burst into rapid fire as encrypted layers peeled away. Her name. Her image. A list of missions. Confirmed kills. Infiltrations. But none of that surprised her. She remembered it. What shook her were the files listed after Denja 9. Missions she was never briefed on. Incidents she wasn't part of, yet her signature was attached to all of them. According to this record, she had been active in at least 4 sectors after her supposed death. Each mission resulted in multiple casualties. High-value targets eliminated. All rogue. All unsanctioned. Her face. Her name. Her tools. It wasn't just a bounty anymore. It was a narrative. They'd turned her into a ghost story and then used her legend to clean up the mess they didn't want traced. And now, they were cleaning the ghost, too. She leaned closer to the screen, eyes narrowing. One particular file wouldn't open. The encryption was heavier than the rest. She isolated it, rerouted the decryption through her wrist rig, and waited. Lines of code danced like heat waves. After a minute, it cracked. The footage began playing immediately. Helmet cam. High altitude. A squad of human operatives, hares, moving through a thick jungle on Denja 9. She recognized their movements. Their jokes. Their voices. Then static. Then fire. Screams. A command came through, distorted but clear enough. Orders from a superior. Fall back and leave the widow in Zone 3. Sacrifice confirmed. Asset disposal priority. No recovery required. She watched herself, bleeding, crawling toward extraction while her squad was pulled back. Then the feed cut. She stared at the blank screen for a long moment. No emotion on her face. No tears. Just breath. Steady. Cold. Then she turned and looked at the empty walls. You tried to bury me, she thought. But I learned to live under the dirt. She downloaded what she could onto a black cube, inserted it into the neural port beneath her collarbone, and powered down the terminal. Before she left, she carved a line into the rock wall with her blade. Not for them. For her. It read only 3 words. I remember now. Outside, the sun was gone. The crater was blue in twilight shadow, silent as a tomb. She stepped out just as a reckoned drone passed overhead, unaware she was already watching it. She tracked its signal, found its base frequency, and smiled. Federation coded. Not pirate. Not bounty. That confirmed it. This wasn't a bounty hunt. It was a cleanup. Back in orbit, a carrier-class stealth vessel hovered in the dark, lights dimmed, communication tight. Inside the war room, 3 individuals watched her footage in silence. One was military. One was intelligence. One wore no insignia at all. The woman in charge turned away from the screen and folded her arms. She found the archive. Confirmed memory recovery. The man beside her grunted. Means she's coming. She was always coming, the third said. Question is, are we going to run, hide, or finally finish what we started? The silence hung for a moment. Then the woman said, put a notice out. Not a kill order. A fake contract. Big bounty. Make it noisy. We'll watch who she eliminates. Let her do the purging for us. And when she gets to us. The woman paused, then smiled. That's what the failsafe's for. Back on the surface, Kira tracked the drone back to its landing site, a hidden relay outpost posing as a cargo dock. She waited until the courier ship returned. She boarded unnoticed, cloaked, silent. Inside the pilot's cabin, she left a message carved into the seat with her knife. A single warning. This time, I bury you. Then she disappeared again. She wasn't just trying to survive anymore. She was taking the war back to them. The vaults beneath Ravok's scrapyard stank of oil, scorched copper, and rotting ambition. The ground trembled every few minutes as massive cranes above dropped rusted cargo haulers and derelict warships into the junk field without care. From the surface, it was just another trash heap on another forgotten moon. But deep below, behind false walls of collapsed plating and reactor slag, Kira found what she had buried years ago. The door opened only to her, coded to her biosignature and a pulse pattern keyed to her heartbeat. Inside, the silence greeted her like an old ally. The room was small, almost Spartan. No furniture, no comfort. Only racks lined with armor, weapons, and pieces of history no longer traceable by modern registries. Black market tech banned by 3 federations. Prototype weapons never assigned to a unit. Personal tools from a life erased. She stepped inside slowly, as if unsure she deserved it. Dust coated the floor, but everything was just where she left it. Her fingers moved across an old knife, dull now, but familiar. Then across a fragment of her old uniform. Then across the longbox. She unlatched it and opened the lid. Her armor was inside, matte black with hairline cracks from a dozen battles. No glow, no insignia, no flair. Built for function. For ghosts. She didn't smile. She didn't whisper any oaths. She just began strapping it on piece by piece, the way she had so many times before. The motions came back like breathing. The weight settled against her like gravity returning to a drifting station. Last came the scarf, red and faded, looped once around her neck. It was the only piece left from her squad. No insignia, just memory. Above her, the bounty was already spreading. The guild had obeyed. Word moved quickly when there were credits to claim. Kira Vale. High priority. Dangerous. Not to be underestimated. Location unknown. Last seen on Calax 3. Alive. Possibly armed. Possibly insane. Rumors said she'd burned through a squad in a bar without standing up. Other whispers said she'd ripped a synthetic in half with her bare hands. None of it mattered. The bounty drew the wrong kind of attention. Loud attention. And that was exactly what she wanted. In orbit above the moon, 3 ex-commanders arrived separately. Not together, not allied, but all drawn to the name that should have remained buried. Commander Renhal of the Intelligence Guild, now a private consultant. Colonel Vass, once her superior officer, now in exile after Denjar 9. And Kale Stryn, the tech ghost, the one who designed the neural network that had once monitored Kira's mission logs. All 3 had reasons to want her gone. None of them knew the others were here. But they all came with weapons, security teams, and half-truths clutched like knives. Kira watched them arrive from a distance, crouched on the spine of a shattered cargo crawler, scope pressed to one eye. She didn't fire. Not yet. The battlefield wasn't ready. They had to be scared first. Split. Questioning. So she waited. She let the whispers work. She let the mercenaries talk to locals. Let them hear about the bodies on the crater rim. Let them find the black mark relay with her message carved into the pilot's seat. Let the paranoia spread. While they scrambled and scanned, she laid her traps. The scrapyard was perfect. It hummed with interference. Too much metal to trace heat signatures. Too much noise for accurate comms. She moved through the wreckage like smoke, laying drones with burst EMP fields, trip mines, and sonic lues that mimicked her footsteps in a loop. She coated several paths with scent markers to draw in dogs and confuse sensor drones. By the time the first squad started moving toward her real hideout, they were already being watched. The first confrontation came fast. Vass's men moved with the arrogance of old military. Flashy, loud, confident. The forward pair triggered a pressure mine she'd buried in the chassis of a fallen shuttle. It didn't explode outward. It exploded upward. Straight through the base of the craft and into their midsections. Gone before they knew they were dead. The rest scrambled, but it was too late. The second line tripped a sonic lure, and bullets ripped through shadows that weren't her. Vass shouted orders, tried to regroup. Then Kira's voice came from the hull of a nearby tank. Not from her mouth. From a speaker. Calm. Mocking. You left me to burn, Colonel. Thought the smoke would hide your cowardice. Vass spun and fired wildly. The echo mocked him. He shouted her name. Promised things. Begged. By the time he reached the spot where the speaker was hidden, she was already watching him through her scope. She let him see her. Let him raise his gun. Then she shot the ground next to him. Just a warning. Run. And he did. Renhol's team was smarter. Stealthier. But too cautious. They sent scouts too far ahead, lost comms. One disappeared into the underhull of an old war cruiser and never came back. Another returned screaming, eyes burnt out from a flash trap. Renhal stayed behind the whole time, observing. Waiting. When his comms cut, he didn't panic. He activated a personal drone swarm and let them scan the terrain. That's when he found Kale. Kale wasn't hunting. He was listening. He'd tapped into the station's lower memory banks and had intercepted the false bounty orders. He knew it was bait. But he didn't care. He wanted to see her again. Wanted to understand. He knew she wasn't rogue. He'd read the logs. The raw logs. He knew what they did to her. He wasn't here to kill. He was here to ask the one question that burned his mind since she vanished. Why didn't you destroy them then? She found him first. Not in combat. In a collapsed bridge between scrapyard towers. He was alone. No weapons drawn. Just staring at the data feed on his screen, waiting for her to show herself. She did. From behind. Quiet. He didn't flinch. They stood in silence for several seconds. Then he said softly, I watched them do it. I didn't stop them. I thought they were right. She said nothing. I was wrong, he whispered. You were the only one who stayed human. She walked past him. Slowly. Gave him her back. A gesture of something close to trust. Or maybe a test. He didn't move. If you want to fix it, she said, follow the blood trail. You'll find the rest. And then she was gone. Behind her, the sky flickered as 3 ships took off in panic. Word had spread. Vass had run screaming. Renhal had vanished. Kale had gone dark. The mercs wanted no part of it now. Not after what they'd seen. Not after the names she'd carved into hulls. They left one final message on a station before they departed. Kira Vale is not for sale. She stood beneath the flickering lights of the scrapyard, watching the ships vanish, armor coated in dust, blades still at her hip. Her breath misted the air. They sent fire. She sent silence. The broadcast ship floated in the neutral zone between 6 war-torn sectors. It was old, unregistered, and built like a freighter, but its internals had been gutted and rebuilt to serve one purpose: information warfare. Pirate signals. Underground news. Secret leaks. The kind of place that traded truth like contraband and sold it only to those who could survive the fallout. Kira stepped aboard without a word. The guards recognized her, or at least recognized enough of her silhouette to pretend they didn't see her walk past them. No one asked for clearance. No one asked why she was there. Some ghosts didn't knock. Inside the control room, she moved to the central terminal. The operator stood up, uncertain whether to bow or run. She gestured for him to leave. He did. Fast. The room sealed behind her. She pulled the black cube from her collar, slipped it into the port, and watched as the system came alive. Data flickered across every screen: command transmissions, fabricated mission reports, bounty declarations, internal memos from the agencies that had tried to erase her. All of it wrapped around her name, framing her as a rogue agent gone mad, a killer with no cause, a warning to future operatives. The lie had lived long enough. She selected 12 specific files. Each one tied to a person who had ordered the deaths of her team. Each one tied to the mission that became a funeral. She added footage from the bar, the crater, the trap at the scrapyard. Then, over all of it, she laid the truth. Her voice. Quiet, steady, undeniable. No theatrics. No edits. Just one take. They called me an asset. Then they called me a threat. I was neither. I was theirs. Until they broke their own rules and told me to vanish. This is what happens when ghosts remember where they were buried. She uploaded it all. A single button triggered a pulse across the open feeds of 6 major sectors. It went to military channels, civilian networks, black markets, and hidden resistance cells. The story lit up the feeds like wildfire. Debates erupted within minutes. Denials came from high places. But none of them could overwrite what people saw. The footage was raw. The blood was real. The lies were familiar. By the time she left the ship, she didn't bother using the side door. She walked straight through the central hall, past everyone. Some looked away. Some looked right at her. But no one moved to stop her. No one was paid enough to try. On Earth, a small room inside a forgotten basement held a black wall of names. No lights. No flags. No ceremony. Just names etched in steel, operatives lost in shadow wars. Kira's name had been scratched off years ago, replaced with the standard code, KIA. Killed in action. Presumed lost. That night, someone walked into that room and scratched a new word beneath her old code. Returned. In a private chamber deep inside Federation Command, 3 senior officials sat in silence. The leak had reached them before their security filters could block it. Kira Vale's name was on every internal thread. The world knew now. Or at least enough of the world to make control difficult. One of the officials asked the only question that mattered. Do we kill her again? No one answered. Because this time, they weren't sure they could. Meanwhile, on a quiet moon station with no name and fewer rules, Kira sat at the edge of a cantina, drink in hand. The bar was cleaner than most, but still loud enough to give cover. No one approached her. The chair to her right remained empty. She wore a grey cloak now. Simpler. The armor was stowed away. Her blade too. She didn't need them right now. The storm had passed. For the moment. A large alien, wide-eyed and half-drunk, walked toward her table with a grin too large for his face. He slowed when he saw the look in her eyes. Then nodded, respectful, and passed by. She watched him go, then returned to her drink. The glass was smooth, cold, untouched by anyone else. Behind her, a bounty alert flickered quietly on a wall screen. But it wasn't her name listed anymore. It was the names of those who'd once tried to control her. High-value targets. Some already vanished. Some trying to hide. The board had flipped. She hadn't asked for revenge. But she had made sure it couldn't be avoided. The door opened again. A younger mercenary walked in, scanned the room, saw her. He paused. Reached toward his hip. Then hesitated. She looked at him once. He froze. Then nodded and sat at another table. The message had spread. Some people you don't chase. Some stories you don't rewrite. She sat in silence for a long time, letting the chatter of the bar drift over her like white noise. A rare moment. Stillness without tension. Noise without threat. Not peace. She didn't believe in peace anymore. But a pause. That was enough. As she reached the bottom of her glass, a child ran through the bar, dodging tables and laughing. Kira followed the sound absently. When the child's foot caught a chair leg and he stumbled, she moved without thinking. Caught him before he hit the floor. Set him upright. No one thanked her. No one needed to. She nodded once, and the kid ran off. The bartender finally approached her, wiping a glass with a half-clean cloth. He was older, maybe ex-military himself. His eyes were sharp. He set another drink in front of her. You done? She looked at the glass. At her hand. At the scars. Not yet, she said. But I'm not running either. He gave a quiet grunt and walked away. Outside, a wind howled across the rocks and faded into silence. Somewhere out there, war would return. More lies. More fire. But when it did, they'd remember this story. The story of the ghost who came back. Who said nothing until the end. And when she finally did speak, she made the whole galaxy listen. And now they knew. She was never gone. She was just waiting.